Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is one that many people have never heard of before. It's a human prion disease, and what it actually does, in the long run, it turns your normal brain tissue into brain tissue that looks like a sponge, full of holes. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, otherwise known as CJD, can be a little confusing to understand, so let me just address some of the common misconceptions up front. First of all, classic CJD is not the same as what we call mad cow disease. It is not caused by bacteria, viruses, or contaminated meat, and finally, there is no cure. Well then, what is CJD? CJD is a neurological disorder caused by the formation of abnormal prion proteins. Normal prion proteins can be found throughout our bodies, but are most abundant in our nervous systems, and that is why CJD affects the brain tissue so heavily. Remember, proteins are long chains of amino acids that fold into a specific pattern in order to help our cells function. The process looks a little bit like this. Now in CJD, something goes wrong during this process, and the normal prion proteins improperly fold into abnormal or diseased prion protein structures. These abnormal prions replicate and cause damage to neurons and create small sponge-like holes in the brain tissue. CJD is considered to be a 1 in a million disease, since about 1 out of every 1 million people get it each year. Between 1998 and 2020, Canada has had 1,064 confirmed cases of CJD. The provinces with the most cases of CJD have been BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, but they are also the provinces with the greatest populations. The most common age of onset for CJD is between 60 and 65 years old. Unfortunately, CJD is always fatal and the life expectancy is quite poor. 90% of people pass away within 1 year of symptom onset, and about 10% of people live 1 to 2 years after. The median duration of the illness is 4 to 5 months, and the average age at death is 68 years old. Let's now talk about some signs and symptoms. The number one sign of CJD is rapidly progressing dementia. This includes impaired memory, impaired judgment, and impaired thinking and reasoning. Some other signs and symptoms are impaired muscle coordination and unsteady gait, visual impairments, and myoclonus, which is when the patient has sudden, uncontrolled muscle jerks. What's difficult with CJD is that many symptoms can be similar to those of other progressive neurological disorders, such as Alzheimer's, Huntington's disease, and even strokes. However, the main difference is that CJD causes unique changes in the brain tissue, the sponge-like holes, which can be seen at autopsy. It also tends to cause more rapid deterioration of a person's abilities than Alzheimer's or most other types of dementia. There are 3 types of classic CJD. There's sporadic, hereditary, and acquired. Sporadic is the most common form, making up about 85% of cases, while hereditary makes up about 10% and acquired is less than 5%. With sporadic CJD, the cause is still unknown. Researchers figure that for some reason the abnormal prion proteins are made by mistake. Errors like this tend to happen as people get older. Hereditary CJD is caused by a gene mutation that has been passed down from a family member. This mutation causes the body to create the abnormal prion proteins. Children of those with CJD have a 50% chance of inheriting the mutation, but fortunately, not all people with the mutation develop CJD. Acquired CJD is usually caused by someone receiving a medical procedure, and it is extremely rare in today's medicine. It can be acquired through receiving a neurosurgery where the tools and equipment weren't properly sterilized and the previous patient had CJD. It can also be acquired through receiving donor tissue or human growth hormones from someone with the disease. Although CJD can technically be acquired, it hasn't been proven hazardous to care for someone with the disease or to provide routine health care. There's only a risk if you're handling potentially infectious tissues or samples, usually from a surgical procedure. Up to this point, we have been discussing classic CJD, but there is another form of the disease called variant CJD. This is what many people refer to as mad cow disease. This variant of CJD is caused by ingesting meat from a cow infected with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE. Variant CJD houses its own set of signs and symptoms, which are more psychological, and the average age of symptom onset is much younger than classic CJD, but we'll save that for another day. Currently, CJD cannot be cured, and its progress cannot be slowed. However, on a positive note, researchers are working hard to find a medication to help those affected by CJD. There's an organization called the Creutzfeldt-Jakob Disease Foundation, which helps to spread awareness of the disease and support patients and their families. November 12th is International CJD Awareness Day, and purple is their color. So if you think of it, wear a purple shirt on November 12th to show your support for those affected by this devastating disease.